All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kristen Whitney Daniels. I'm with the U.S. Federation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. We're so excited to have you here today. We're going to do a justice update and hear from Sister Bethany Welsh. This is actually, I think, her first justice update for our Dear Neighbor series. So we're really excited to be able to hear from her. She's been traveling, crisscrossing the U.S., hear from her about some of the work that she's already done and some of the stuff that we have planned for the future. We ask that everyone remain muted while we are in this session, and we'll have time for questions later. And as we always start, we start with our opening prayer, which is our consensus statement. Stimulated by the Holy Spirit of love and receptive to the Spirit's inspirations, we move always towards profound love of God and love of neighbor without distinction, from whom we do not separate ourselves, and for whom, in the following of Christ, we work in order to achieve unity of neighbor with neighbor and neighbor with God. In humility, the spirit of the incarnate word. In sincere charity, the manner of St. Joseph whose name we bear. In an Ignatian Salesian climate, that is, with an orientation towards excellence, tempered by gentleness, peace, and joy. And we also include a maxim with every Dear Neighbor series that we do, and we chose Maxim 97. When you meet contradictions, strengthen yourself against human fears, continuing to hope when everything seems to throw you into hopelessness regarding the success of your undertakings. And that's a translation from Marsha Allen. Sometimes life is tough, but you can handle it. Develop a courageous heart. And that's a translation from High School Student. So I am going to stop sharing and let Sister Bethany Welsh share from here. For those of you who haven't met her, she started May 1st, St. Joseph the Worker Day. I think it was a very fitting day to have Bethany join the Federation team as our Justice and Peace Coordinator. So thank you, Bethany, and I'll pass it over.
Thanks so much, Kristen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to apologize in advance. I have a little bit of a cold as the nature of the travel, right? Up in the air and down on the ground. We're also having some fun construction work happening in my building. So if I disappear, that's where I went to work with the fire alarm guys. But no, really, truly a joy and grateful to be here. You'll see some photos as I share the slides of various things that I've engaged with this past year and hopefully some of your spaces too. So one of the incredible graces of this ministry, particularly as a newer member, is that I get to journey to visit your communities, your sponsored ministries, your associates, your partners in mission, and deepen the relationships across the charism. So where there are photos, they are primarily ones I've taken or people have contributed from the various spaces. So when I began this position, there was a lot of conversation about what we have done and what we might do in the future. Much like a lot of us who have some community organizing training, I started with one-on-ones with our various justice promoters and some of our leaders to find out what they were most interested in and what would be most helpful, as well as where there might be gaps or opportunities for strengthening or improving our programming, and also where their dreams were. And so much of what I heard was a desire to have some support on the ground or really behind the scenes for the 27 justice promoters that I work with. So if you figure we have 16 congregations and some of our communities have more staff or fewer staff, some have a large team of associates and some have one full-time staff member who's a sister or a lay justice promoter. So a lot of what I'm doing is meeting with those folks, finding out what's happening in your communities, and then hoping to come alongside and indeed also to organize and amplify the work. I also heard a lot from our justice promoters about a desire to build our skills, particularly in a few key areas. And so you'll see some of those opportunities we've had this fall. Certainly at the heart of our work, right, is to be a contemplative in action. And so we've convened a variety of prayer services this year. Encounter opportunities, I think, are something we have done a little bit in the past and hope to do more in the future. That's often for young adults, where we engage them in direct encounter with a social issue through a more hands-on experience. So we have the virtual, which is great for our national work. It's also wonderful for our sisters, particularly with less mobility. And then the encounter or the face-to-face might be helpful for some newer folks, people that are coming from other entry points. I'm also available for help with corporate voice statements, either specifically for the US Federation or for your own congregation. Particularly those of you who have fewer JPIC staff, I'm always happy to help think through a policy issue. As you know from maybe watching my breakthrough episode with Christian Murphy, pictured here on the screen from Brentwood, I do have a background in public policy and it's a passion of mine. So happy to help with some of the technical pieces. I sit on a number of national committees and coalitions on behalf of the Federation. I represent us in legislative advocacy spaces, and I'm available to join you on Zoom or perhaps in person with enough planning for educational talks or other kind of maybe even creative actions or experiential activities on our 5 focus areas. Here are just a couple pictures from this past weekend at the Ignatian Family Teach-In. Some young students who are just preparing to give a talk to an elected representative. Our Justice Booth at the teach-in, and then 2 folks you'll probably recognize the Congregation of St. Joseph, Sister Erin McDonald and Kasha Seymour. Other things that I work on, obviously you've seen before, internal federation efforts. I'm going to speed through that, but that was our Ignite presentation at the 375th anniversary. When I talked about representation, there's 2 key spaces I've been in the past few weeks that were at invitation of a particular group. So the binational encuentro and the mass that occurred in San Luis, Arizona, where we processed over 60 pilgrims on the US side, joined by several more hundred in Mexico, to raise awareness about deportation, detention, and the issue of disappearance. And I hope both in this presentation and in your own spaces, you've been seeing these monarch butterflies migrate and move with us across our understanding of what's facing our immigrant kin. And you'll also see them move into spaces as we come together in the spring in various ways. I also got back from a pilgrimage of hope in Selma and Montgomery with our friends and sisters at the Catholic Mobilizing Network. As so many of you are familiar, this is a ministry that began or has its roots in the Congregation of St. Joseph. And it was such a privilege to journey with partners in mission, sisters and associates from across the Federation, who are really bringing awareness in some ways back to an issue that can get lost at times when we try to separate out our social justice issues, which are actually very much intersectional. And so we were being attentive to the issue of racism, particularly racial trauma and racial terror in the form of lynching, and to really soak in and immerse ourselves in the gift and grace of the history of the civil rights movement, to particularly ask ourselves, what does it hold for lessons learned for now, this moment, and how we might be in the future? Particularly Martin Luther King Jr.'s nonviolent stance was a piece that kept coming forward as we're faced every day in our country now with extreme violence, hatred, and political terror. I also spend time on collaborative organizing. And so if you go to neighborhood meetings or in your city, you're in conversation with your elected officials and key stakeholders, similar things are happening virtually across the country. And so this is just one example in a snapshot. Earlier this year, I was approached by Jesuit West, which is our brothers in the western part of the United States in the Society of Jesus. And they said, we want to do something on migration that is very specifically Catholic. And we know there were some maybe troublemaking sisters from the Sisters Speak Out campaign who could come and help us do this work. And so we gathered a few of the congregations that participated in that work back in June, and it grew significantly to include Network Social Justice Lobby, Pax Christi USA, LCWR, and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops MRS office. It began with a simple desire to be public and faithful in prayer about what was happening to our immigrant brothers and sisters. And so we convened in a variety of locations. Over 150 in-person vigils happened on October 22nd. We had thousands of people join across the US in virtual vigils and again in-person vigils on the 13th. So because the US Federation of Sisters of St. Joseph committed early on to this process, others were able to mobilize and then to catalyze their own stakeholders to be present. And so the pictures you see here are from in front of the Newark Detention Center, Delaney Hall, as well as an image from Northwestern PA, did a beautiful rosary march. And certainly while we do the organizing to gather together, right? We then also always have actions for next steps recommendations. So you're seeing just a little snapshot here. If you received emails from me after an event, you know that we'll always be inviting you to go deeper and to think more intentionally about your own choices and those perhaps of your congregation. Federal advocacy is certainly what I thought I'd probably be doing more when I took the ministry position. But because of the state of our democracy at this time, that's a little bit less likely to actually get in to see our legislators. Certainly in the last 50 days, that was even more difficult. But that hasn't stopped us from going to the US Capitol. And so just here are some images of various expressions of our CSSJ community on various issues. So I just mentioned the Ignatian Family Teaching for Justice. That was 1,800 youth and young adults who traced their roots in some way to St. Ignatius of Loyola, Ignatian spirituality, or taught by the Jesuits. There were a number of CSSJ schools, including some, I thought, very entrepreneurial women from St. Teresa's Academy, who said, we'll go first and not bring students this year. We'll get the lay of the land, and then next year we'll bring students. We had students come from a school in Brentwood that's sponsored by the Sisters of, or Puerto Rico, sponsored by Brentwood, and so many other young adults who are just on fire for justice through the lens of the Catholic faith. We also went to the Hill earlier in June with Catholic Climate Covenant, and you'll see some friendly and familiar faces there. I mentioned the skill building. That was something that your justice promoters, if you are one, or if you are a leader who represents a community, when I sat down and I talked with the JPIC folks, they said, you know, some of us have the skills that we need for the work. Some of us are newer, and some of us think our communities might be able to stretch and grow in ways that, or revisit content that we haven't touched in a while. So we convened 3 workshops with 4 panelists each and had just really a deep dive into what it was that they do well in their respective areas, time for reflection and conversation among each other in small breakouts, and then kind of coming back with our lesson learned and more questions for our presenters. We also are just at the tail end of this exciting social justice poster design contest. We have a small committee of artists and justice promoters who will meet tomorrow morning to select 3 designs that will be hosted on the Ministry of the Arts website that can then be downloaded for use in public witness and prayer across the Federation. Relationship building and bearing witness. Much like the pilgrimages and representing us in various locations, a lot of what I've been doing this past fall is simply being present to where you are. So here you'll see examples, particularly all throughout Western New York and into Canada. Again, a grace of this for me is I get to be with some of our newer members, people that I have had experience with in the novitiate and in tending the flame, and then with sisters who have been around for a very long time and have lived this call and this vocation with such faithfulness. I was particularly inspired by the work in Toronto of our sisters who are paying attention to the exploitation of migrant workers. While Canada has a very different social welfare safety net, they struggle with some of the same issues that we do in the US, of how we use up people in the pursuit of our own consumer choices. And so they did some very creative theatrical productions and other hands-on experiences to invite people to contact their legislators for more just working conditions. There's some exciting things coming up. There's always an opportunity, I think, after we have a meaningful encounter to reflect and share together. So we know that there were a number of sisters, not just on the Catholic Mobilizing Network, but some other congregations of St. Joseph also participated in civil rights space this past couple of weeks. So we like to gather together and have an open space for virtual reflection. We also know that there's a delegation of sisters and partners in mission who are going to Honduras. And so we would like to gather again in another way to invite people to share their prayer and their experience of encounter. In January, we're going to be having a book club that's based on a new text by Dr. Tia Noel Pratt, who is a graduate of the Sister of St. Joseph School here in Philadelphia, and who just finished this book, Black and Catholic, Racism, Identity, and Religion. And so Dr. Pratt has generously agreed to do a book talk for us, provided that we do our own book study prior to her gathering. So we'll put together an online study guide for you. We'll offer you opportunities to gather virtually where you can be in breakout groups and discuss together, and also invite you then to hear her talk in February. A little bit before that, towards the end of January, we're going to talk about the new papal exhortation. We have a wonderful panel that kind of balances the theology and practice that we're invited to in that particular document with a special attention to the CSSJ charism of unioning love. That panel has just come together. We have the date. We'll get that save the date and a Zoom link out for you soon to register, but definitely some exciting ways of being together. We'll also move out of virtual space and into real time in Philadelphia with our justice promoters in April. And I promised everybody we'll go to the West Coast next year and then the Midwest the year after that. So we'll be able to capture as many folks as can join us through a variety of travel. So I'd love to open it up for your questions because I think that has been such a gift in this work is to hear from all of you and to know what it is you care about and how I can better support you.
Thanks, Bethany. This is a great update, and clearly you have hit the ground running since you started this position. I just wanted to open it up and see if we have any questions for Bethany. Um, Anything folks want to share, you can either pop it in the chat or feel free to unmute. We have a question from Lori. Uh, do you plan to visit Border Compassion with Sister Susie and Jabro in the future?
I think it's a distinct possibility. When I mentioned the encounter opportunities, I think part of what we will gather as a staff, is it next week, the week after Thanksgiving, we'll gather as a team for the first time since Deidre has been with us that I could also be there to really talk through our budget and ways we can gather more people together in person, which also includes going to locations like that. So thanks for putting it back on my list. We'll make sure it's on the agenda when we gather the first week of December. Thank you.
And it's certainly been on our radar of something that we support. And we know that Orange and Los Angeles has certainly, their congregations have certainly been supporting their efforts.
And I'll add to that while you come up with some other questions. We would love to also highlight and name specific like material opportunities for folks. So if you have a ministry that can accept a donation of some kind, particularly, financial or otherwise, where you're highlighting a specific need. Oftentimes people will reach out to me who have participated in a federation activity who are not necessarily a sister or an associate, but they look to you and your legacy of faithfulness as an indicator or a support for a particular ministry. So always feel free to email me and say, hey, we're putting a lot of energy behind commissary accounts for detention, people in detention, et cetera. So by all means, let me know. Sister Janice.
Hi, thank you. I work with an agency called Casa San Jose, and we are a resource center for Latinos. And I'm wondering if you would refer to me any group that you find is really doing exceptional work with rapid response teams. I'd like some
Absolutely.
pointers. We have
Pointers
a team,
yep.
but yeah, we have a team, but I'd love some pointers.
Yep, I know there's some great work. Pox Christi, New Jersey is doing some really good work. And then there's another group in California. So I will get that to you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. I'm going to take a question from the chat and then Gina will go over to you. We have a question about funding for high school students to bring students to various CSSJ programming. I know that the Federation itself we don't have the structure for that necessarily. But I think, Bethany, I don't want to talk for you, but I know that there is definitely an interest among the Federation of engaging with high school students, college students, those connected to our charism, maybe to connect on more local events that might be in your area.
I think a secondary piece of that, and something I just did in Washington, D.C. for 3 days, is prepare young people to go visit their legislators. So, whether we can support the whole process or not, I can always come alongside a group if you say, hey, we're really focused on the environment, and then I can pull together a particular policy ask or some background information, or even just the spirituality piece and reflection that might guide people into a deeper relationship with that social issue or a particular community. So my recommendation is that we start creatively with smaller bite-sized pieces, and then I'm always happy to write grants. So if somebody knows there's a person who wants to give to this work, we certainly would need the substantial funding to do that type of thing.
Thanks, Edie, for that question. Gina Sullivan.
Hi, Kristen. Hi, Bethany. I'm Gina Sullivan. Yeah, I don't see a lot of my communications, I guess, counterparts on this call. So I guess my comment isn't so much of a question as it is just a reminder for all the justice folks. Because I work in communications and I'm so fortunate to be from the congregation of St. Joseph, and I have Kasha, who is so wonderful at letting us know what you all are doing, because we want to be able to share it out with our both internally and externally with our audiences. So just a reminder, please share with your communications people. Yeah, otherwise the only people who know what you're doing really is you and the people you're with, and so we really want to be able to share it out to the world.
Perfect public service announcement. We're always championing the relationship between justice and communicators. I think we're also thinking internally about that even more, and we'll continue to figure out better ways to collaborate in the future on that. Thanks, Gina. We appreciate it. And then I have from Sister Nancy Corcoran. Do we have any updates on LGBTQIA, one of that as our priority areas?
Thank you, Sister Nancy. Yes, I just met with a young student on Friday, a trans student who would like to be part of a conversation. And then I have an associate as well who is willing and able to be part of a larger space. So I think part of what, after your very capable work in June, I think what became very clear is that there needed to be some more relational work done before we could offer up a safe space for people to share for the purpose of justice and peace within LGBTQ plus inclusion. So yes, stay tuned. Definitely for 2026. Hopefully early on we can gather some smaller, less public Zooms and then offer something full to the Federation once we have almost like a little advisory group. I think this is a space that demands a little bit extra care and safety for folks just because of the way the internet works now. So as we move into that, I will definitely look to you, Nancy, for some advice and guidance there.
And I think I saw Deirdre's hand up at one point, but I don't see it up anymore. So I just wanted to.
No, just to second what Bethany shared around the high school students and the structure of the Federation at this point. There is so much potential in that space, and we would need to create, and we are certainly open to this if it's how the Spirit moves, to create some ways for funding those kinds of opportunities together, that it's not something that the Federation is directly funded to do at this point, but we are eager to build those relationships and collaborate.
Thanks, Deirdre. I just want to thank you, Lori, for sharing that. She shared in the chat that Mount St. Mary's University, which is one of our sponsored colleges, that they offer a minor in social justice and sexual diversity. Bob, you are going to be our last question for today.
Yeah, it's just really a promotion. I just, on this point, we're having here in Orange, I'm here in Orange, and we're having an event in December called Good Faith Conversations, and we're inviting some non-binary Christians, ecumenical Christians, to come in and just share their stories here on campus with the sisters. So I'm happy to report back in after that event to see if it's successful, but it's sort of one of the things that we're doing that seems to be in line with this conversation. So I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because I think that's the balance right now, right? Is how do we do things in a face-to-face relational way, and then also offer it out to the Federation. So by all means, give me your ideas and observations, and then we can loop that into the work we're planning for the larger federation.
Yeah, I think the key about that is relates back to what Gina was saying about communication, and obviously communication between justice and communicators, but also communicating to us at the federation level. We know so much amazing work is happening across the United States. Some of it we hear about and we read in publications, and some of it we might not. So if you have something that, especially if it fits in some of our priority areas, definitely feel free to reach out to us and let us know what's happening. That's how we keep an ear to the ground when we can't be in all of our 20 congregations and provinces at one time. So thank you. Thank you, Bethany, so much for sharing. You've had a whirlwind tour, and we look forward to all the stuff that's already being planned for 2026. It's gonna be an exciting year. Thank you for all of your work.
Thank you.
And if you enjoyed Bethany's conversation today, you can also hear her next month. We're going to talk a little bit more. Bethany kind of gave a little bit teaser on the restorative justice pilgrimage that happened in Alabama, which was sponsored by Catholic Mobilizing Network, which is a sponsored ministry of the Congregation of St. Joseph. They have been doing amazing work around restorative justice, ending the death penalty. And so we want to bring light to their work, as well as the CSSJs who have participated in that pilgrimage. And then in January, we're going to have Shannon Green on, who was our very first representative of our membership expansion on the Leadership Council. Our Leadership Council operates like a board of directors for the Federation. And because of this new structure that we have been building, we were able to get the first representative from there. So she's going to talk about her experience, how we're building it out, and how we see the future. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. Just do want to note that in December, after the December Restorative Justice Dear Neighbor series, we're going to send out to everybody who signed up for Dear Neighbor series another link, because we've had this link for a couple of years now. We have some people unsubscribing, so we just want to have kind of a clean start with that a little bit and make sure that we're not overwhelming anybody. So I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Thank you for joining us as always, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Take care.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everybody.